What happens when privilege turns poisonous? When the silver spoon becomes a weapon against its own legacy? The answer is pure chaos. Stay with us until the end as we uncover how one of the royal family's greatest disgraces continues to drain the estate his ancestors built, and the one thing Prince Andrew refuses to give up. This is the royal saga of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. Prince Andrew was born into luxury, a man destined to live within golden cages, burdened by expectations he could never truly escape. As the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, he was never meant to wear the crown, never the heir, never the chosen one. Yet from his earliest days, he behaved as if the world owed him obedience. Privilege shaped him into a boy accustomed to command, with a fiery temper and little patience for limits. At the royal stables, a young Andrew once grabbed a sturdy stick and struck the horse's legs, watching as they flinched in pain. It wasn't childish play. It was a window into a boy discovering his power to dominate the weak, a chilling glimpse of the arrogance that would define his life. Palace life was no fairy tale either. Behind the grandeur were strict rules and harsh discipline. Andrew was beaten by palace guards as punishment for defiance, a severity rarely inflicted on royal children. In another whispered tale, after annoying an employee, he was tossed into a pile of debris. When he ran crying to his mother, the queen refused to accept the staff member's resignation, recognizing that her son was at fault. It was a lesson that might have humbled most children, but for Andrew, it only reinforced his belief that shame could be hidden behind entitlement. Those early moments carved the man he became, one who would cling desperately to power, possessions, and privilege long after the world had turned against him. Yet amid all this, one place became his obsession, a house that represented both freedom and defiance. Nestled within Windsor Great Park, it wasn't his yet, but in his mind it was destiny. The lodge, with its 30 rooms and sprawling gardens, became a fantasy escape from the rigid walls of Buckingham Palace. Official records show that young Andrew often visited the estate during family retreats, soaking in its grand halls and imagining it as his own private kingdom. To him, it symbolized something deeper: independence from the royal hierarchy that constantly reminded him of his second son status. He dreamed of walking those corridors as master, of shaping its every corner to reflect his taste and power. Even as whispers circulated that he'd never wear a crown, he acted as though this home was his birthright. That yearning foreshadowed the man he would become, a man who would rather be shamed than surrender what he considered his. And in 2003, his dream finally materialized. Prince Andrew secured a 75-year lease on the Royal Lodge, a sprawling mansion that needed massive restoration. Records reveal he poured £7.5 million into renovations, adding a swimming pool, a conservatory, and lavish updates throughout the 30-room estate. But this was more than renovation. It was declaration. Every marble floor, every gilded doorway, every sculpted garden path was his silent statement. The Royal Lodge wasn't just his refuge. It was the perfect reflection of his upbringing, grand, rigid, and utterly unforgiving. The boy who had once been beaten by guards, humiliated by palace life, and shaped by its cold indifference, had grown into a man who unknowingly recreated that same world around him, flawless on the surface, fractured underneath. The Royal Lodge became a reflection of Prince Andrew himself, a sanctuary built from ambition and privilege. Within its walls, he could pretend to be untouchable, a man insulated from judgment, surrounded by luxury that muffled the noise of scandal. Yet those very walls would later bear witness to his downfall. For all its beauty, the Royal Lodge became both his fortress and his cage, a place where the illusion of power would crumble beneath the weight of disgrace. In his youth, it was a dream, the refuge of a second son. As time went on, it became the silent backdrop to a very public collapse. For a while, things seemed steady. Andrew had served as a decorated soldier, earning praise for his bravery in the Falklands War. But decades later, everything unraveled. In 2019, his long-buried association with Jeffrey Epstein resurfaced, casting a permanent shadow over his life and reputation. The infamous BBC Newsnight interview meant to clear his name. Andrew's clumsy attempt to explain his friendship with Epstein came off as arrogant and unbelievable. He insisted that he stayed with Epstein in 2010, merely to end their relationship, but few believed him. Then came the moment that sealed his fate in the court of public opinion. Andrew's bizarre claim that he couldn't sweat during an alleged encounter with Virginia Giuffre, blaming it on a medical condition caused by an adrenaline overdose during the Falklands War. Medical experts and the public found the excuse absurd. His credibility crumbled overnight. Virginia Giuffre accused Andrew of sexually assaulting her when she was 17, alleging she had been trafficked by Epstein and forced to be with the prince. The now infamous photo, Andrew with his arm around Giuffre, Ghislaine Maxwell smiling in the background, became impossible to dismiss. Andrew denied everything, but the damage was done. In 2022, he quietly settled a lawsuit out of court for a reported £12 million. As part of the settlement, he expressed regret for his association with Epstein and acknowledged the suffering of the victims, pledging to support efforts against sex trafficking. But his reputation was beyond repair. Queen Elizabeth II stripped him of all his military titles and royal patronages, effectively exiling him from public life. Even family gatherings, including Christmas at Sandringham, no longer welcomed him. The honors he once wore proudly were gone, and the Royal Lodge, once a symbol of ambition, now stood as a monument to disgrace. Yet the past refused to stay buried. In 2025, former Swiss beauty queen Beatrice Kuel claimed that Epstein had tried to lure her years earlier by promising an introduction to Prince Andrew, 6 years before the prince claimed to have met Epstein. The revelation reignited public outrage and deepened suspicion that Andrew's narrative had never been truthful. His ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, also came under fire for her own questionable ties to Epstein, ensuring that the shadow cast by one man's downfall. In 2025, the City of York Council convened to decide whether Sarah Ferguson should lose her honorary title. Following the discovery of an email in which she referred to Jeffrey Epstein, the move mirrored the council's earlier decision to strip Prince Andrew of his own honors, a stark reminder that the fallout from their associations with Epstein. Andrew's repeated efforts to distance himself from the scandal, from citing a medical condition to denying all allegations, only deepened public disbelief. The once admired prince who had dreamed of ruling from the Royal Lodge now stood disgraced and alone. The house that once symbolized ambition and privilege had become a monument to ruin. By the mid-2020s, Prince Andrew had been stripped of nearly everything: his influence, his titles, and the respect he once commanded. The Epstein connection, the Virginia Giuffre allegations, and the disastrous Newsnight interview had done more than damage his reputation. They had exiled him from the royal world that had defined his very existence. Every appearance was dissected, every word doubted, every gesture seen as hollow damage control. Andrew had become a ghost of royalty, haunted by scandal and silence. The Royal Lodge, once his dream home, now served as both refuge and prison. Within its grand walls, he clung to the fragments of a vanished life. Memories of Sarah Ferguson laughing in the gardens, of birthdays filled with laughter and light, of moments when the title Prince still carried weight. The lavish renovations he once took pride in, the swimming pool, the conservatory, the private cinema, now mocked him. They were no longer luxuries but relics, reminders of a past he could not recover. What was once a symbol of power had become a gilded cage. Andrew's social circle collapsed. Invitations ceased. His military affiliations were gone. His royal patronages vanished. The man who once stood beside the Queen at ceremonies and posed with world leaders now wandered the echoing halls of Royal Lodge in isolation. That isolation bred desperation, and desperation fed his refusal to let go of the one thing still his. Former Epstein associates, journalists, and investigators continued to dredge up his connections, flight logs, parties, encounters long denied but quietly documented. Each new detail reignited public anger. Emails, sightings, and staff accounts. Even the smallest revelations became front-page fuel for outrage. Prince Andrew's name had become synonymous with shame. His every move was judged through the lens of contempt. Even the multi-million-pound settlement with Virginia Giuffre in 2022 brought no redemption. The £12 million payout was a financial blow, but the real cost was his permanent exile from royal life. Public opinion remained unrelentingly hostile, and the monarchy moved to erase him from its image. Invitations to weddings, Christmas gatherings, and royal events were rescinded. His place within the family hierarchy had effectively been erased. Confined to Royal Lodge, Andrew tried to maintain an illusion of normality. But reports from those who knew him painted a picture of isolation. Friends whispered of erratic behavior, long solitary walks through the gardens, and hours spent alone in his private cinema. From the pool to the conservatory surrounded by paintings, furniture, and silence. Each step through the grand halls reminded him that the world outside had turned its back. The house that once represented triumph now stood as the last remnant of a life that had slipped irretrievably away, and the man within it, a prince in name only, was left to face the emptiness he had built around himself. Sarah Ferguson remained tied to him in a complicated, often strained way, sometimes visiting, sometimes keeping her distance. Yet even that bond was clouded by scandal and public judgment. Their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, were left to navigate the aftermath of their father's choices. Andrew's attempts to maintain normalcy often ended in frustration and detachment. The family that had once defined his sense of self was now fractured, and so he withdrew, seeking solace in the one place that still felt like his. The estate, with all its grandeur, became a stage for reflection and regret. Every gilded railing, every landscape path, every echoing hallway reminded him of what he had once possessed, but also of what he had lost: public respect, belonging, and family closeness. Royal Lodge became his final refuge, yet also his silent punishment. Its shimmering pool offered no comfort, its blooming conservatory, no warmth. What was once a symbol of triumph had turned into a monument of isolation. Even minor scandals continued to pierce the walls. New allegations, resurfaced links to Epstein, and relentless media scrutiny ensured that Andrew's world remained under siege. Each headline served as a reminder that forgiveness had not come, that privilege could no longer protect him. By this point, Prince Andrew's life had shrunk to a single center of gravity: Royal Lodge. It was his home, his fortress, his prison, and his sanctuary all at once. Within its walls, he clung to fragments of identity, sheltering from a public that had already moved on. But the mansion whispered an unrelenting truth: wealth cannot erase scandal, luxury cannot repair a broken reputation, and no amount of royal blood can restore what trust has abandoned. Now, let's look at the house itself, the so-called House of Drums. Nestled on the edge of Windsor Great Park, the Royal Lodge appears tranquil, almost timeless. But for Prince Andrew, it is far more than just an estate. It's a monument to memory, privilege, and denial. Corridor and window carries layers of both history and personal obsession. Originally built in the early 19th century, the lodge has housed generations of royals, including Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. For a young Andrew, childhood visits there planted the dream that one day this grandeur would be his sanctuary. He roamed its gardens as a carefree boy, unaware that the same grounds would later become his gilded cage. In 2003, he secured a 75-year lease on the property, investing £7.5 million in renovations and paying a £1 million premium. The result was a transformation. Royal Lodge became a modern palace wrapped in the elegance of tradition. The main residence now boasts 30 rooms, including 7 bedrooms, grand reception halls, and a conservatory that opens to manicured lawns. Every renovation reflected Andrew's need to assert control, to say, "This is mine, mine to command, mine to preserve." Inside, opulence dominates. Oil portraits of royal ancestors line the walls, flanked by chandeliers that spill gold light onto deep carpets and velvet upholstery. Each room feels like a declaration of heritage, yet also a reminder of the privilege he squandered. Royal Lodge stands today not merely as a royal residence, but as a mirror of one man's rise, fall, and confinement within the walls of his own making. Outside, Royal Lodge stretches into a world of manicured perfection, formal gardens, a glimmering pool, tennis courts, and a secluded walled courtyard. The pool sparkles under the sun, an emblem of royal luxury that stands in stark contrast to the public image of Prince Andrew, a man now synonymous with scandal and disgrace. Every hedge trimmed to precision, every flower bed arranged with military order, the grounds radiate control. Yet for Andrew, these immaculate spaces are more than beauty. They are barriers. They form a psychological moat, a carefully cultivated distance from scrutiny, gossip, and judgment. Even the servants' quarters and staff offices reveal the same obsession with containment. The gardener's cottage, the maintenance wings, all designed to ensure that Andrew could run his empire in seclusion, minimizing intrusion from the outside world. This meticulous control mirrors the man himself, desperate to manage his surroundings, even as his life beyond the gates spiraled into chaos. Inside, the lodge has been both witness and participant in his story. Family milestones once unfolded here, the birthdays of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, celebrated in private rooms, summer afternoons in the conservatory filled with laughter and hope. But those echoes have long faded. In their place lingers silence, the quiet despair of a man exiled by his own actions. Even the spaces meant for joy, the cinema, the pool, the dining rooms have absorbed the weight of scandal. Each corner carries the residue of humiliation, each hall a whisper of relentless media scrutiny. The ghosts of Epstein's shadow, the hurried damage control, the aides who came and went, all have left their mark. Some rooms now stand untouched, frozen in time. Dust settles on covered furniture, books lie unopened, and hallways echo with the hollow sound of what once was. The architectural grandeur of Royal Lodge cannot disguise the human frailty woven into its walls. And now, the story nears its inevitable turning point. When King Charles offered Frogmore Cottage, it was no gentle suggestion, it was a royal command cloaked in courtesy, a symbolic demotion, a message that Prince Andrew's chapter as a senior royal had ended. Royal Lodge, with its history, prestige, and personal memories, was no longer his to claim. Moving to Frogmore Cottage would not just mean relocation, it would mean acceptance that he is no longer central to the monarchy, no longer shielded by relevance or rank. His refusal, then, is not mere pride. It is resistance against erasure, a clinging to memory, status, and identity. Royal Lodge is more than brick and garden. It is the heart of his past, the stage of family milestones, the sanctuary from judgment, the last vestige of control in a life unraveling. To leave it now would be to surrender decades of belonging. Sources close to the palace describe the standoff as delicate but palpable. The king, polite yet firm. Andrew, defiant yet cornered. Every letter, every meeting, every subtle nudge from Buckingham carries the same unspoken truth. Royal Lodge is no longer negotiable. Yet Andrew clings to it still, fighting not just for a home, but for the last fragment of himself.